Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about books that I've read recently in the past few months. So it's the end of July and I have read 902 pages, which is finished 2 books. I haven't got my actual reading journal with me this time, so I'm just going to have to show you it on my iPad, which at the moment it's plugged in because it keeps dying. The first book I read in July was the Atlas Complex. Now, I've spoken about this book a bit already in the previous video. If you haven't watched that, yeah, please go check it out. But I did actually really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars, which is a good book. It could definitely have some improvements, but I think it was a good ending to the trilogy. And characters went in so many different ways that I didn't necessarily expect them to go in. But I think it all fitted the characters. My favourite character from the first book ended up being my least favourite character in the third book, which I actually think fits her progression. It fits her character development because the whole kind of overarching moral almost is that not everyone is a hero, that heroes aren't always the best people, but that doesn't mean they're villains, that they're something in between. I did a very simple book spread for that, just wrote down loads of quotes from it because I think it's a well-written book basically. However, people don't like this book because it is very rambling and I think it could have been shorter, but I think as I said before, it fits the characters well for that style to be what it is. Next book I read in July was The Dark Mirror, which ended up being my favourite book of this month. I gave it 4.5 stars. Here it is, here's the cover, very good cover. And the new design as well, because I read the first 4 books by Samantha Shannon in the Bone season, her old versions before they were rewritten, so I've now got, I guess, the more modern covers, though it is sad that her books now won't fit the other covers, but it's fine because this one's a hardback anyway that I had, so it won't fit the other paperbacks anyway. I really enjoyed this book because I think the world of the Bone season is really unique, and all the kind of, I guess, magic system of clairvoyance is something that I've not really seen in another book, and that's why it's really interesting. I do think Paige is a really interesting character, main character as well, and the dynamic that she has with her love interest is a really interesting dynamic where it's not like fully physical straight away, it's a kind of slow burn relationship which is right for them and is done well. Though one thing that did slightly annoy me about this book is that there was almost a spoiler quote on the back where there was a romantic quote, obviously, between 2 people on the back, and the previous book ended on a massive cliffhanger where you didn't know really whether one of the characters survived, and then you get this quote on the back which is romantic, and you think, well, it can only be between these 2 people, and it has to be between these 2 people, and therefore you kind of know the answer to whether they survived or not. And maybe I'm remembering this wrong, maybe it's not necessarily surviving, but you obviously know whether this person's betrayed everyone or not already. Though Paige does figure this out rather quickly, which is needed, but I'm not sure that bit was done the way it could have been done. However, once these 2 characters were reunited, I've really enjoyed the book from then on. I apologise if you can hear more things now. outside because I have just opened the window. Hence why I gave it 4.5 stars, because the first half was good, the second half was great, and because it got back to the kind of type of book the rest of them are, where they go on kind of missions as the underworld and that type of thing, and it's less overarching story and more what we're used to, which I like. Though obviously each book is set in a different kind of country, and this book was set in Italy, so it is really cool to see how different countries in this universe deal with people who are clairvoyants, which ones are in the free world, which ones are under the rule of Skion, or however you pronounce that. Yeah. The book spread that I did for this book was a drawing of Paige and Arcturus, and I do just love their dynamics so much, and I was so happy when they reunited. The book I read, or started reading, in July, The Magician. Some kids having like a photo shoot on the grass outside the house. So yeah, this book is actually 2 books in one. So I am classing this as 2 books, and I only read up to book 2. Well, I'm only planning to read up to book 2 as a book, as this is the rewritten version of Magician, as I think the original was published in 1982, so it's quite old. Though it's good value for money that you're getting 2 books in one instead of having to buy 2 books separately. This book is such classic fantasy. It's very Tolkien-esque, and I actually can see how other authors like Robin Hobb could have taken inspiration from this if this came first, and even Brandon Sanderson. Some of the like tropes, types of characters. You've got dwarves, you've got magicians, you've got very classic fantasy things. I haven't actually read Lord of the Rings, however I do imagine it to be quite like this. You follow a main character called Pug, name quite funny, and how he's becoming a magician. It took me a little bit to get into this book, but once he was kind of settled, I guess, and we got to know the characters in the keep better, I really started to enjoy it. However, then they left the keep because everything can't be the same forever, and then that made me enjoy it a little bit less, because I was happy with them being where they were and didn't think we had gotten everything that we could have gotten out of it there, which is mad because this is a big book. But then I started to really like it again once we got to the dwarves in the like mines, and I thought, oh my god, this is just like the Mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings, where the dwarves like, I know where you can go, you don't go that path, you go this path, and then they come across a little monsters in there, which is so Mines of Moria. And I'm not saying this because it's a bad thing, I'm just pointing it out because obviously if it's a trope that works, do it again, you know? The kind of love interest so far of Carline and Pug, you can tell at first that obviously he's gonna like her, you know, as the main characters like the girl, but he didn't openly adore her from the beginning, which I thought was good because he wasn't old enough to at the beginning, and he kind of matured and started to realise his feelings, and I thought that was good that he wasn't just like love struck like all the other boys were for her from the beginning. Though I'm not sure it's going to work out for them, so I'll have to see how that goes. I probably will end up giving this book 4 stars because it's good, but I feel like there's little bits where I'm like, I wish we did something else there. or I wish the whole first book was just him in the keep with those people and that he didn't leave, but I guess that was needed for him and his friend Thomas to have the character progression that they needed perhaps for the second book. So yeah, join me at the next month shortly to see what books I finished in August. So now it is the end of August, so I'm going to tell you what books I read in August. Here's my reading spread. As you can see, I finished 3 books this month, which was 1,567 pages. Now that is a little bit more than usual. And that averages 51 pages per day. Before I get into which books I've actually read this month, I'll give you a quick look at how my other spreads are going in my reading journal. So here you can see I have now read 20 books this year, and the pages per month is at a high this month. So the first book I finished this month was The Magician by Raymond E. Feist. So this chunky book actually contains 2 books, as I might have just said. So I am just classing this as 2 books. So I read the first book in this book called The Magician, and I gave it 4 stars. It's actually in a series. It's the first book in a series of 4 books called the Riftward Sagas. I did start this book last month, and I got fairly close to the end, to be fair. But I've really enjoyed the first half of this book, maybe first 2/3, and then the last third-ish didn't as much, which slightly worries me going into the next one, because I really enjoyed the dynamic of Pug being in the castle keep place, and when he left I didn't enjoy that as much. I did then start to like it again once we got to the dwarves, then after that I just didn't quite, I wasn't hooked by it basically. So it's a good book, it's very Tolkien-esque, Lord of the Rings, but maybe that's just not the type of book that I'm really into, which is weird because I am a fantasy reader. But here's the spread I did. I drew the ship from the invading aliens. Now that was something quite funny, because when you think of aliens you think of something from another planet and world, but which these people were, the invaders, so that's why they called them aliens, but that makes you think something really sci-fi, which it isn't, which, I don't know, I almost couldn't take that seriously because they were calling them aliens. But overall it was still a good book, that's why I gave it 4 stars, because the first half really intrigued me. The next book I read was The Secret Commonwealth, Book of Dust. This is actually a reread, which I haven't reread anything in a while, because the next Book of Dust is coming out in October, so I really wanted to refresh myself, because I did read this in 2019 and that's quite a while ago. So I have been waiting for a very long time for the next Lyra book to come out. I did give this 5 stars because how could I not? I absolutely adore the main trilogy, His Dark Materials, and even the TV series that came with that, and the first movie that originally was made. So I just love being in the world with Lyra and Pan. It is quite a depressing story between Lyra and Pan, as they do have a bit of a falling out, which leads to their separation for the duration of the book. So you can really kind of sense the meaning behind that and the kind of hatred they have for themselves in this, which is quite a disturbing thing to read about. And I have seen this placed quite almost in the children's sections, and I really wouldn't agree that it's like children, probably YA, but because of things that happen in there and then like abuse that you see occurring, which isn't for a younger audience. And I know Philip Pullman has said before, he writes with stories about children, though she is 20 in this book, because they're the ones who can experience this world without any life experience changing the way they experience it. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily for children, even if it's about children. But yeah, I can't wait to see what happens in the third book. I've been waiting so long for it, I really can't wait. Plus, do you want to see this amazing hardcover? It would be quote and dust, of course. I mean dust in the Start Materials way. For anyone who doesn't understand, I am not calling my book dusty. You've also got to take a second to appreciate the covers on these books. Like, the first book is also beautiful, and this book is beautiful, and the third book is more beautiful than these. This is the reading spread that I have done for this book. It's got hand alignment, the alethiometer, and a note that Pan left for Lyra when he left. This book really challenges what it is to be an adult, going from a child to an adult, because that's what Lyra's experiencing. And she's following trends, she's being pushed down different ways of thinking that she shouldn't be and that are dangerous to her mind. And you can even see that reflected in modern day, that yes, she's at a university in Oxford reading books and this is what's diverting her, but you can even, as I said, you can see that in modern day about, say, the internet or things you see online diverting you to a negative way of thinking. Really tackles what imagination is, and that as a child you have lots of imagination, and Lyra especially had a lot of imagination, and the way that she's losing it as she gets older, but that she doesn't have to if she stays true to kind of who she is at the core. And yes, she'll change as a person, but she can still have that imagination inside her if she wants to, and that's one of the reasons they disagree with each other, because they don't like how the other is changing. And that was my favourite rated book of the month. The final book I read this month was The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. This book I rated 4.5 stars. I would class this book as a kind of gothic fantasy, if you could say that is its own kind of subgenre of fantasy. And a kind of unique, well, not fully unique, I think Terry Pratchett's done this and Olivia Blake has done this kind of plot as well, but I must say I enjoyed this one more than I did the Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. So in this book you follow a main character called Hazel as she is born the 13th child of a big family, so she has 12 siblings, very big family, and the parents don't think they can provide for her, and they get offers from different gods, including death basically, and he says that he'd become her godfather and he'd take care of her, which is such a cool concept, like death as a godfather, which wow. And eventually Death comes to collect his goddaughter and he wants her to become a healer. Now that seems quite counterintuitive for Death, well, not Death to happen, but this story does let you dive into the actual thoughts and feelings behind Death, and that Death doesn't actually want people to die, it's his job to kind of look after the souls and once they die and take them to wherever they are. There was a really cool concept of candles being your lifespan, which I drew a candle in my book spread. Hazel could see all the candles when she went to the place where they're stored, and I just thought that was really cool that a candle was your life, and when your candle flickered out, you were dead. There was a romance kind of subplot, I would say, because even though this cover talks so heavily about the prince and the romance between them, I would say it doesn't come in until like here. Like, there is the first part of the book is Hazel kind of growing up, and I've seen a lot of reviews saying they didn't like this part of the book and that it was slow or whatever, but I actually would say I preferred this part of the book, though I did still like when she was at the kingdom castle place, when she was helping the king. This romance was a good romance between Hazel and the prince, but it wasn't as done integrally as it could have been. Like, the hints and stuff I felt came on quite suddenly, but when they actually started being romantic towards each other, I was like, wow, that's so cute. However, that wasn't my favourite relationship in this book, surprisingly. My favourite relationship was actually just between Death and his goddaughter, or Merrick as he is called in this book. Now, their relationship was just so beautiful as they learnt about each other's thoughts and feelings, and Hazel began to understand that Death really did care for her and that he needed her as much as she needed him. And I thought the ending of this book was just so beautiful. It made me cry because of what happens at the end and how beautiful it is and how it summarises their relationship. And I'm so glad that at the end it was still just Hazel and Death together, and we saw a moment between them, and that was, I wrote that down completely on the spread because it was so good. Now, those were the 3 books that I read this month, and see you in a moment for what I read in September. Welcome back. It's now the end of September, and I'm going to show you what I read in September. So here's my reading spread. So you can see that I finished 2 books. Nearly finished 3 books, to be fair. I was quite close to finishing the 3rd one. The first book I actually finished was The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith. Here is this mammoth of a book, as they always are, literal bricks. It is definitely a weapon. The book spread I did is here. Now, do not read this if you don't want spoilers, because I put a very big quote from the end at the beginning of this. Here's the fish that Pat gets and calls Strike. The charm bracelet and a Masonic knife. This book I did give the book of the month to, because it was so good. Like, I enjoyed it a lot. Though I think I still prefer the previous instalment to this instalment. So it's from a series called Strike. It's the 8th book in the Strike series, and yeah, I gave it 5 stars. It's all about Strike and Robin, 2 detectives, and this time they have a murder in a Masonic silver shop. And obviously you're not reading these books just to find out about the murders, but that is obviously a main part, the crime solving duo. But you also read it because of the relationship between the 2 characters, which is very, very, very drawn out, will they, won't they? However, that's half the fun of reading these books. I really enjoyed the beginning and end of this book. There was a lot of different plot lines though, which did make it a little bit confusing. Like, the body could have been 3 different people, or 4, even 4. I think it was 3. and they had a lot of characters therefore like related to each person, which is a bit more than usual. That was still well done. The middle section where the two characters are annoyed at each other was annoying, to say the least. I get that they can have their disagreements and stuff, but like it didn't need to go on quite as long. Though the ending, great, amazing, superb, can't wait for the next one. So sad that I'm gonna have to wait probably 2 years. Well, it depends, sometimes they're a year, sometimes they're 2 years. I hope it's not 2 years, but I kind of bet it's gonna be 2 years. The second book that I finished was The Ministry of Time. Now I'm saying that I finished because I actually started this book before The Hallmarked Man. However, The Hallmarked Man then arrived as it just got released and I couldn't wait to read it. So I put this on hold, but I actually read this as an audiobook whilst reading that. So that's why I've read so many pages this month, because I didn't read this, but it's still classed as reading an audiobook. This book I gave 4 stars. The book spread I literally just drew the cover basically, except from the no reflection, because that was enough. It is a sci-fi. However, the sci-fi notes are quite small throughout majority of the book. However, at the end, the sci-fi notes pick up dramatically, and I really enjoyed getting to know the characters in this book as the expats from time have been brought to the future, and it's how they're kind of getting along and understanding modern day, and that's just really interesting how different people from different times would probably be thinking about things in modern day. There is a bit of a romance, as said on the back, and I liked how that was done. I also like the representation of different types of people from the past, because obviously people who you would consider more modern did exist then as well. At the end, it got quite... I feel like it almost changed style slightly, as you got kind of a commentary from the author, well, from the narrator, who is our main character, and you kind of got to know what happened before it happened, like this. And I didn't fully like that, because it was almost like you were being spoiled, because you knew something was going to come up. I did like how it all got complicated, but it almost didn't quite fit with the rest of the book. Like, it was cool, I just feel like sci-fi notes should have been interwoven more throughout. Though it was, then it wasn't. I guess it's just a matter of opinion about whether you think this is fully its genre. And the third book I started reading this month was Fool's Assassin by Robin Hobb. Now this is the 14th book in the realm of the Elderling series, which is mad. As I always kind of say, like, oh my god, this is the 14th book I've read by this author in this massive series, like, what? This book follows Fitz and the Fool, and mainly, well, it's called Fitz and the Fool, though the Fool hasn't appeared when I was reading it in September. You follow Fitz, my favourite character ever, basically, as he lives in a kind of manor house, and you kind of follow his life as he is with Molly, and you meet his new daughter. That's kind of a spoiler, but like, I'm sure massive spoiler that I got. I really like the cover on this one compared to the original Fitz Farseer trilogy, as look at the little detail of the house. That's like so cute, and it's quite fitting that the final 3 books in this massive series are like golden and silver and like cobalty, rusty. I think they deserve to have such a regal colour, but not regal, don't refer to regal. I am really enjoying this book. I feel like her writing has changed since the first series quite a bit, and it has been interesting to see that change throughout the books, because Fitz isn't necessarily with the same people that he has been with constantly in the other books. I thought maybe that I wouldn't enjoy it as much, however I am. So I'm definitely gonna read the next one straight after this. Maybe I'm gonna put off the final one, but we'll see. I probably just read them all in a row because I just want what happens, and to finish this absolutely massive series. Overall, in September, I read 1,701 pages. So that averages as 57 pages per day. I'll show you where some other spreads are at. Books in 2025. I'm now on to my 23rd book. And my pages looking good. Though obviously that is slightly exaggerated by the fact I listened to a lot of the Ministry of Time. My genres spread is also looking quite cool, I think. I've got quite a range of genres and subgenres here now. The next instalment of this series will be the final one of the year, as I'll have done 4 videos by then. This is wow, cool. So if you do like hearing about what I'm reading, please like, comment and subscribe. Comment down below what books you've been reading recently, what your favourites have been. I love to hear about what you're reading. So see you in a few months.